Hey guys, I'm Emiline, aka Winterstar Cosplay, and in this video I'm going to be teaching you how to make a flower out of Worbla's Black Art. I'm going to be making the Altean Juniberry flower from the show Voltron Legendary Defender, but this technique will work for pretty much any kind of flower. So without further ado, let's get into the video. To make this flower, I'm going to be using some of these scraps of Worbla I have left over from previous projects, and I'm going to start out by drawing some petals onto a larger scrap of Worbla. This particular flower has 3 different petals, and so I just sketched those on using a pencil, though I also went back and I actually made a paper template to draw in more details as well. Next, I needed to cut out the pieces of Worbla, and to do that I took my heat gun. A heat gun is one of the most important tools when you're working with Worbla, especially when you're cutting it out or trying to shape it, as when you heat up the Worbla it makes it a lot easier to cut out. And to cut it out I just used my sharpened box cutter knife. Once I cut out all the different pieces, I also went back and took my scissors to trim them into a shape and a size that I liked better. And once I was done, this is the petals that I ended up with. I actually changed them a bit more moving on, but this is the base that I had to work with. Once the petals were done, it was time to make the stem for the flower, and for this I used some long skinny pieces of Worbla that were again left over from a previous project. I heated these pieces up with my heat gun and then rolled it out into a long skinny piece, folding it back on itself and then rolling it again until I had a length and a thickness that I was happy with. I also took some more scrap pieces of Worbla and heated up, sculpting it into a small piece to connect the stem to the base of the petals. Once that was done, I also heated up the small piece that I had just made, as well as the stem for the flower, and then connected them together. One of the great things about Worbla is that you don't usually need glue, because once you heat up the pieces, they will just stick to themselves, and when it cools down, they are firmly stuck together. Once I finished making the stem, I also wanted a small leaf for it, so I traced that onto another scrap piece of Black Worbla and then cut it out. I also heated it up afterwards and used a small embossing tool to press some leaf details into both sides of it. Once I was done, this is what I ended up with. And again, just like for the stem, I just needed to heat up both the stem and then the leaf and press them together. Since I wanted the leaf to sit in a particular way, I heated it up and let it sit on my finger until it cooled down, until it was a shape and a size that I was happy with. Next, it was time to move on to attaching the petals, which, as you can see, I trimmed a little bit more to have a bit more of a natural shape. I first heated all of the pieces up with my heat gun, and then heated up the stem as well, and then carefully connected the 3 different petals. In the show and the reference art that I'm basing these petals from, they have a very particular shape, so I heated up the petal and then used my fingers to hold it into that particular shape until it had cooled down. And once I had finished attaching and shaping all of the different petals, this is what the flower looks like. The last thing that I needed to make for this flower was the little bit in the middle of the petals that I don't know what it's called because I'm not a botanist, but I used some scrap pieces of Worbla for this and then squished them all together into one long piece, heating it up and then cutting it so that I had 3 small pieces branching out from a single branch. I shaped it with my fingers and some more heat, and then once it was done, I used more heat to connect it to the actual base of the flower. And once all the pieces were connected, this is what the flower looked like. Now that the base construction part was done, it was time to prime and paint it. To prime it, I used some Elmer's wood glue and a simple paintbrush, painting on a layer of wood glue over the entire surface of the Worbla. Once the first layer of wood glue dried, I used some sandpaper to smooth out some areas that were a little bit more rough, and then I added a second layer of wood glue, sanding it again afterwards. Once that was done, it was time to start painting. I like to add a base layer of black paint over most of the projects that I do, so I started out with some simple black acrylic paint over the entire surface of the flower. Once the layer of black had dried, I mixed together several different shades of paint until I found a bright pink color that I was happy with, and then I painted several layers of that over the petals of the flower. For the stem and leaf, I did several layers of a green paint, and then for the part in the middle, I used a bright yellow. Once all of the layers of base color had dried, I took a darker shade of green to add more shadows and depth to the flower, making it look just a little bit more realistic. I did the same thing for the yellow part in the middle, and then again for the petals as well, adding a darker shade near the base. I also added some darker shadows underneath the petals to make it look just a little bit more realistic in how an actual flower might look. Once all of the base colors and shadows were done, I needed to add the details on top of the petals. For this, I mixed a lighter shade of pink and took a very thin paintbrush, carefully painting on the details onto the petals. This step took some time, but I'm really happy with the result and how the paint job turned out. Finally, I needed to seal the paint job that I just did, so for this I used some satin Mod Podge that I got sent from Plaid. I did a layer of this Mod Podge over the entire surface of the flower and then let it dry. Adding this layer of sealer on top just makes it so that the paint won't chip off as easily, and also makes it so the flower has an even shine all the way across. And now the flower was done! I hope that you liked this video and that it was helpful for you in learning how to create your own flowers using Black Worbla. If you did like this video, be sure to like and subscribe to my channel so you can see more cosplay videos in the future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.